I'm Thomas Smith, and today I'm sharing my take on what's happening with Google Gemini. And I think that, we've seen this launch that feels like Google's trying to get back in the playing field with OpenAI in a lot of ways. And I think, ChatGPT kind of surprised everybody with its popularity around this time last year, a little bit earlier than this time last year, end of 2022, and then just took off to an incredible degree, much more so than I think OpenAI and Microsoft as their backers were expecting. And that left Google in this sort of awkward position of playing catch up, as it were. They sort of had to release something, even though they probably weren't quite ready. And that's how we ended up with Bard in its earliest form. And to me, it was really always geared towards information retrieval. I think it still is. It's still sort of being built for search. But in the earliest format, it really was much, much worse than ChatGPT, honestly. It couldn't really perform nearly as well. It was sort of on par with GPT-3 or 3.5, not anywhere close to GPT-4. And now we have this announcement of Google Gemini. And this is sort of, I think, the AI they wanted to release and the time frame that they wanted to release it. And if OpenAI hadn't happened with ChatGPT, probably this is when we'd be seeing Gemini come out anyway. So I think Gemini is going to kind of catch Google back up to where they want it to be, where they expect it to be. And it's going to make for some pretty big changes in the SEO and web design space and much farther beyond that. So, a couple things that stand out to me looking at the Gemini launch. There's three pieces to it. There's Gemini Pro, which is available now. It's powering Bard. And already I've seen Bard get smarter and better. It's still, I think, not on par with ChatGPT powered by GPT-4, but it's better at some things. So I've tested it a lot. For example, again, for information retrieval. Like if you ask it to write an article that requires pulling from a bunch of sources and synthesizing those into a useful article and citing those sources accurately, it's pretty good at that. So I did an article, about the Bay Area, and I asked for an article about the number of homeless people in this area and the homelessness issues. And it cited maybe 4 or 5 reliable sources. It was pretty accurate. It pulled that information in and wrote the article very quickly. So I think it's very good at that. It doesn't seem as creative as ChatGPT in terms of really understanding the structure of a blog post, the structure of an article. It sort of fails in that. And it also isn't very good at writing stuff that's super compelling. I think ChatGPT kind of understands human psychology a bit better than Bard, or maybe is a little bit more willing to play with it and to influence it in a way that Google might not be comfortable doing. So, it's definitely an improvement over the original Bard with Gemini Pro, but it's not quite at the level of ChatGPT. Sometime in 2024, probably early 2024, Google is going to release Gemini Ultra, which is their biggest, most powerful frontier model. And I think that will be on par with GPT-4, maybe even exceed it. It may bring in better multimodality, so it may be able to process video, for example, process images natively like GPT-4 Vision can do. It'll probably be a great deal faster than ChatGPT just because Google, going for that search use case, they've really emphasized speed through the whole process. And, if you're trying to return an AI-generated result for something like search generative experience, you really need it to come quickly. People aren't willing to wait. So they've optimized for speed. They have the computing power to run these things at an incredible scale. So I think we'll see Gemini Ultra come out in early 2024. It'll be multimodal. It'll probably compete with GPT-4 in terms of its overall power and, creativity, and it'll probably be faster. And then the other area where I think Google's going to try to compete there is price. So GPT-4, especially using Vision, is pricey at this point. And, we're not talking dollars per query or anything, but much more than GPT-3. I run Google Vision and I'm paying like $20 a month for API credits at this point for a fairly limited use of that. Mostly testing, mostly internal stuff. And I can see how if I scaled up to do an app, something publicly available built on GPT Vision, it would be just overwhelmingly expensive to do that at the moment. And Google, whether it's a good thing or not, has the resources to eat those costs. It has the capacity to scale up without worrying so much about those costs. And so I think they will probably try to undercut OpenAI on the pricing through the API so that when developers build apps, it's much less expensive to build an app using Google's Gemini Ultra than it is to use GPT-4. And so that's probably going to be a big determinant of what ends up happening. I don't think it'll necessarily be the biggest, though. I mean, look at Amazon EC2 and that whole world versus Google. A lot of people use Google's cloud for their software, but a lot of people still use Amazon, even though Amazon is in some cases more expensive. Google really tries to aggressively bring in startups by offering these huge credits to use their services, and we still see a lot of people use services like Amazon. So I think it's going to be comparable. Google's going to try to undercut OpenAI on pricing of their API, but whether that succeeds or not, I'm not sure. Maybe it'll help them grab some of the market share there. But basically, I think that's what we're going to see with Gemini Ultra. The big question is, will OpenAI do in response? Because they're not just going to sit around and let Google come and eat their lunch. They're going to be, constantly upgrading and innovating and probably trying to upstage Google in the process too. So it's very likely that they'll release a GPT 4.5. I think that'll probably bring more like speed enhancements, and it'll probably integrate vision and some of those other capabilities natively into the API at a production level. And at the moment, it's in there, but it's explicitly sort of an alpha product. It's, again, very expensive. And so I think they'll make it fully Maybe they'll be able to process video natively, maybe not. But I think we'll just see in GPT 4.5 speed improvements, maybe cost improvements, and an update to the most recent data. Currently, it's at April of 2023, which isn't bad. And we'll see those vision capabilities built right in. At some point, we're likely to see GPT-5, probably right around when Google releases Gemini Ultra. That'll probably be mid 2024 would be my best guess. And it's anyone's guess what that's going to include. Probably similar level of multimodality, almost certainly, integrating video and maybe even a video generation in there, which I think both companies probably can do, and they're just holding back on it in the same way that a lot of companies held back on image generation early on out of concerns that, it would be used for nefarious purposes, deep fakes and that kind of thing. So I think we'll see that come out much more in 2024, possibly in Gemini Ultra, almost certainly in GPT-5 when that rolls out. But to me, the most exciting thing about the Gemini announcement actually isn't either of those things. It's the Gemini Nano, which is their smallest model. And that's sort of the third piece in that Gemini trifecta. So why would a small model be exciting? The reason is that it is very efficient. And, even with Google's resources, running these frontier models is super expensive. There's no real business case for doing this at scale. OpenAI is burning through huge amounts of money to get market share, which is fine. It's what startups do. But it's not really a long-term business model at the moment. That said, though, if they're able to take something like this nano model, which reportedly has somewhere in the range of 3 to 4 billion parameters, so still big, but nowhere near the rumored trillion parameters in GPT-4, they can take that and use those nano models much more efficiently. You'll start to see things like large language models on cell phones, maybe even large language models built into your car, the processing there, or large language models built into a pair of smart glasses. And that unlocks some pretty incredible capabilities. So you'll start to see a lot of stuff get smarter all of a sudden because it can run these large language models on the edge, as we would say in the computing world, and out on devices that are in the world. You won't have to be sending data to the cloud. And things like that. Also with a nano model, you'll see more uses in medicine, for example, because part of the problem now with LLMs is you have to send patient data out to ChatGPT or elsewhere in the cloud in order to process it. A lot of places with HIPAA and other things can't do that. So there's limited use cases for large language models in medicine and other sensitive fields just because the data has to make that trip. Now, if the data can be processed on a local computer or on some kind of medical device, even with a small scale, very efficient LLM like Gemini Nano, then you can start to do that processing locally. You don't have to send data, which means it'll be faster and also more secure. And you can start to use it for, medical use cases and things like that. We're already seeing that Google is using that on some of their phones to do things like video and image processing. So I think we're going to see, as the models become more efficient and can be run on mobile devices, a lot more LLMs being integrated into all kinds of stuff that right now they can't be because they require too much computing power to operate. And I think that also in the world of SEO and content is going to mean a major shift because, at the moment, Google has admitted in their antitrust proceedings that they're not really able to understand, or at least as of a few years ago, they weren't really able to understand the content of a page. They were really guessing at the contents of a page just based on other signals, like links to it, very rudimentary sort of vector embeddings on the page and that kind of thing. But, obviously Gemini Pro could understand what a page is about, could really get at whether an article is good or not. But running that at scale across the whole internet would be so expensive that it's unlikely Google's doing that. They're probably still using other metrics, other signals. Maybe they're analyzing websites, some level using generative AI, but it's just too pricey to scale that up with today's frontier models. But if Gemini Nano makes LLMs super efficient in the same way that, data centers have gotten more efficient because of the use of processors designed for mobile that consume less power, we'll see Gemini Nano basically be the model that could analyze every web page on the internet in a cost-effective way and start to understand the content more. So I think that work of creating a powerful but efficient and small large language model with a few billion parameters that still can be very useful will turbocharge Google and other search engines' ability to actually understand content, because they'll be able to use LLMs and the power of LLMs to understand pages, to analyze pages according to things like their quality rater guidelines at scale at a pretty reasonable price. And that could mean some major changes for the SEO world, probably in a positive way, I think, for people who are creating good content. Because now, it won't just be about links and about kind of gaming the system. If an LLM can read your page and understand what it's about and understand whether it's good or not, we could see a lot of websites that are producing good content but that aren't being rewarded suddenly be rewarded for that. And, we'll probably see better search in other Google products like Gmail. We'll see a lot of improvement there. We'll also probably see search generative experience from Google get faster, get better. Imagine they're probably going to use Gemini Pro primarily for that as sort of the middle ground. But again, any work to make models more efficient on the lower end with things like Gemini Nano probably are going to spill over and make SGE cheaper so they can run it for more queries, faster, and just overall better. So that's my take overall on Gemini as an announcement. I think at the moment it's not really earth-shattering. If anything, just puts Bard a little bit more on par with ChatGPT. But in 2024, with Gemini Ultra, it's going to ignite an arms race. We're going to see the two companies, OpenAI and Google, really competing head-to-head, releasing products side by side, adding multimodality, making things faster, and competing on price, which I think will be really good for both companies. And we're going to see these efficient LLMs like Gemini Nano start to take over the mobile world, the edge world. We're going to see them integrated into more products. We're going to see more phones that can use LLMs locally. And we're going to see more integration of LLMs into the search side of things, just because that race to the most efficient model is going to make all the models more efficient and cheaper to run. So a lot going on. But that's my take on where we're going to see things go in 2024. If you want to follow along, I encourage you to join my newsletter. You can go to nofrills.influencer.com. I'll include a link down below in the show notes. You can go and sign up, and I'll be analyzing this, keeping an eye on it, and filling you in. You can also get a copy of my guide to 7 incredibly useful GPT prompts. These are things I've tested as a content creator over the last year, and I've sort of whittled it down to the stuff that's genuinely helpful and genuinely can get you somewhere with ChatGPT in terms of doing useful stuff in your day-to-day life or in your job. So thanks for tuning in, and looking forward to a interesting year ahead in 2024.